Right. Hello, Amal. Thank you for being here.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad we somehow color match. It was not planned at all, but
Yeah.
I do see this color is like brown, but also like brown. I don't like muddy brown. And then you're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, how is your PhD program going these days?
Going good.
Hmm,
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So I'm in my third year and I'm just currently writing. So it's really up to me when I submit, but I do hope to submit within this year or early next year. So let's see.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
what is always your plan to do a PhD? I mean, you have the Fulbright master. What is plan during your master?
No, actually, not really. So during my master's, I met a few people at Vanderbilt who were doing their PhDs, and it was inspiring to see them do it. And then a few of my friends were just like telling me how they think I'd be good at doing a PhD just because I was always very into studying and researching. It wasn't. I don't think I'd made up my mind till I came back from Fulbright and I started working. And when I had a research idea in mind, that came from my work environment, that's when I thought let me do a PhD because I knew that if I wanted to do a PhD, I think it had to be on a topic that I was really like interested in and passionate about. I didn't want to do a
Uh,
PhD just for the sake of doing it. So I think it was a slow process, like where I decided, okay, I'll do it. So it was never like part of the plan. Like a master's was always part of the plan. Had to do one, but PhD was something that came much later.
okay, okay. I was reading
Yeah.
that for your Fulbright master, you have been focusing on English language learners. Is there
Yeah.
like interest there? Have you been teaching students for English language, or how did it start from there?
Yeah, so after my undergrad, I did the Teach for Pakistan Fellowship. So I taught English for 2 years there. And of course, like in the Teach for Pakistan Fellowship, you teach in a government school, right? So there are lots of challenges and struggles of teaching English to students when English is not even their second language, right? It's like their third or fourth language at times. And so that was an interesting 2 years where I learned a lot, but I finished the fellowship thinking that I still want to learn formally how do you teach students English when it's not their first language. And that's when I think after my first year at the fellowship, I decided to apply for the Fulbright and I wanted to apply for masters for English language teaching as a second language. So that's where that came from.
Oh, okay, okay. I have a lot of
Yeah.
students. Generally, we see students are applying for education major. But do you think it's very like a popular choice going for English as a second language? I don't think people really understand why it's so important to pursue that qualification.
No, a lot of people with me who were in the Teacher for Pakistan Fellowship went for programs like education policy and management.
Yeah.
But I personally wanted to go for something that mattered to me because I taught English for 2 years and I could see that it's a huge challenge. I really didn't know how to teach because, in Pakistan, a lot of the assumption is that if you know how to speak English or if you're good at math, you can just teach math or you can just teach English. But I don't think that's the case. You really have to learn how to teach a subject. Just because you're good at it does not make you a good teacher. We've all had teachers who were great at their subject, but were terrible teachers, right? They just didn't know how to teach. So I think I really wanted to go get a formal qualification in how to teach. And I wanted to come back and continue working in English because I realized that while English is not, our students' first or second language is important in like the globalized world and especially in Pakistan with higher education being in English, right? If they want to get to university, they need a certain amount of English. And I realized that this is a problem. I think with masters in education depends on what you're interested in. A lot of my friends did masters in education policy and they came back and they were doing very interesting jobs. But personally, for me, an education and policy didn't sound very interesting or appealing at the time. So
Okay, that just reminded me. My reason for going for Fulbright was we think that just like you are taking and feeling that just because you can speak the language doesn't make you a qualified teacher of that subject or domain. Now I have seen
yeah,
that when you are trying to make a classroom inclusive for all learners, the assumption is that the teacher just needs to know how to accommodate students with disabilities in their classroom. But I've seen how
yeah,
struggle with accommodating for different kinds of disability because they are not qualified to think. They don't have that training, so that was my reason for
Yeah.
going for Fulbright. And I remember when I came back, when I started talking about mainstreaming, because it was my own experience with mainstreaming. Deafness and disability is like there's a huge spectrum, and what will work for one classroom will not work for another. And similarly, you need to have
Yeah.
confidence, but subject knowledge and qualification is so important. I remember when I was going for my master, I was learning all those things which were really new to me. Did you feel that way
Yeah.
doing Fulbright as well?
Yeah, of course, I learned a lot of new things because when you're teaching in a classroom, you also don't have time to sit and research on how to teach, right? Like we tried, but we were working with the Teacher Box and Fellowship. We were teaching 6 days a week, and of course, you have to plan your lessons. You have to like check homework and classwork. So there's a lot happening. So
Mm,
we did the best we could, but I learned a lot on how to teach and English and how to teach a language that's not their first language, and what are the best ways of doing it and what you should look out for. So of course it was a 2 year program. So I also got to teach in high schools in America, which is something that my program didn't allow. But I basically, so I'd gone for English language learners program, and there was another program on the side which was called teaching literacy. It was basically for US based teachers to become literacy coaches in schools. So for
mm,
that, you needed to be licensed to be able to teach in a classroom. And of course, I didn't have that license. Like I was not, I couldn't go and get that license to teach. But I spoke to my program director because I really wanted to like, because literacy coach was one step level next, right? Like being a trained as an English teacher is one thing, but then being trained as a literacy coach to help other teachers, that was my eventual aim anyway. So I spoke to my program director, and then they were able to pull some strings where they said, okay, fine, you can do. So I did like a dual major kind of a situation. And then I was also able to teach in high schools, even though technically I wasn't allowed to, but they made some
mm.
like exceptions and things.
But
And so that was pretty cool.
thank you for
Yeah.
telling
So
me
that,
that. That is what I like. That's what I like about the Fulbright program. That it is flexible, and that you need to be proactive about your needs and wants and what you want to do. Even though the program requirement and Fulbright requirement will be different, but it all depends
yeah.
on how you are proactive on campus and like being very self-aware what you need to do because it will come very handy when you return to your home country. I remember doing
Yeah.
something like that too, but there was a very strict criteria with completing our master's program. The minimum credit hours were 36, and I remember I went up to 72 because it was a 2 year program. And then I went for an internship, which was normally not acceptable for J1 visa holder. But again, like
Yeah.
my department chair was able to put in a word. I think people need to look beyond the academics. Don't you think that is beyond the
Yeah.
academics? Try to look for those opportunities which you will not find here back in Pakistan.
Yeah, it's just about asking. Like, I mean, wouldn't know if I'd been able to do it if I hadn't asked my program director at my university, right, that I'm interested in this course. And she was also very pleased with my proactiveness as well. Like, oh, there's someone who eager who wants to do a program that they couldn't apply it. Like I couldn't have applied to it originally because I wasn't eligible for it. But once I got to the university, I spoke to her. So it's all about being proactive and asking. If you don't ask, you'll never find out, right? So that because that added a lot of value to my first major, to my first program, and I was able to take a lot of learnings from that literacy coach degree when I went back to Pakistan afterwards as well. So yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And how did you find the challenge of doing a PhD? I mean, we have teachers who want to go for PhD. It's a very common thinking that I have a master, I have an MPhil, and now I can go for PhD. But one of my bone of contention is you need to be at least be good at doing research. So, what would you advise for someone who is trying to get into a PhD program but don't have very strong research background? What is your advice for those? How can they backfill? I think it's like backfilling, trying to fill in
Yeah.
the gaps that you know you don't have or you have, and then backfilling those either from here, taking up online courses. I mean, there's this understanding that people in Pakistan in the undergrad program they don't even get to do a full-time teacher or dissertation, and they just complete a final year group project and submit it.
Yeah.
Don't have that kind of research experience. What will be our recommendation for them?
I mean, honestly, I didn't have a lot of research background either because in my undergrad, I didn't have a thesis either. I just did like a senior year project, which was with a professor who was already doing research in an area. And I just sort of helped him write it out and did some research for him, but it wasn't very structured research. That's the only background I had. My master's was a very practical degree. So we had something called a practicum, which is basically all the assignments you've done throughout the year. It was like your teaching Bible kind of, where you wrote your teaching values and all of that. So it wasn't research based, it was more practitioner based, that how do you see yourself in the classroom, and then how do you like so even in my first major, we did have some opportunities to teach, where we had to video ourselves, and then if, based on that you had to write. So that was again very practitioner based. So I didn't have a research background for my master's either, but I think it depends on different fields. For education, I think they do value a lot of like practitioners coming into being a PhD, because as teachers or like literacy coaches, or in whatever capacity you're working in an education setting, you will observe your environment, right? And from there you might have an idea of, this is a problem and I want to research this. Because that's what happened with me when I came back from Fulbright. I was teaching in a college, and that's where I noticed this issue that kept coming up, and I was very intrigued and wanted to research on it. Um, and I didn't have any research background, but I think so for the UK, you have to write a full on proposal, right, for your applications. So I think that is where you can show your strength, that even if you don't have research background, you can make sure that your proposal is very well thought out. I did lots of readings, to find what theory I want to, and I read a lot. And so, the theorist I chose back when I was writing my proposal, I'm still using the same theorist, because I'd done such proper research that I knew that this guy will fit really well. And I wrote out my proposal, and I reached out to professors in the UK who didn't have to help me, but they actually helped me revise my proposal. They reached out to me and they spoke to me. So I think all of that helped in creating a solid proposal. So while I had no research background, I did try to get a more research background. So there's a professor, when LUM's SOE opened, the School of Education opened, there's a professor there who was doing similar research to mine. So I reached out to her saying that, you're doing similar research, I'm interested in research, maybe I can like collaborate with you. I was willing to move to Lahore, or I was willing to use my Karachi college where I was working, that experience and those students as maybe participants for a future research with her, but that didn't work out. But I tried to, if I could get a paper published or some research experience before I applied. But that didn't work out, but I still went ahead with my proposal because I felt as long as it's a good, solid proposal, I can still get in. And because my proposal was backed and based on my experience of teaching, so it had a very solid ground to it. So I think in education, it may not matter as much. Of course, it's always a bonus and it helps. But in my case, it didn't stop me from getting an admission and getting funding. But I can't say that for other fields in engineering or STEM. I think every field is very different, so I can't speak
Yeah,
for
it will be
how
big
that would
difference.
matter.
Yeah. It will be big
Yeah,
difference for non-education background, like the technical.
yeah,
I've seen how industry professionals, they are able to tap into PhD because translating their academic skills and project-based experience to now academic language. That is a bit of a struggle, but I have seen how industry
yeah,
professionals, especially like software engineers and project managers, they are now able to transition to PhD because the language by default is the understanding of the industry and why they need that PhD, because most PhD for industry professionals will definitely help them with the industry job later on with the training
yeah,
and research and development. Because if you're making an app, I have seen how there's so much to learn about your users and your general demographics, that if you have this understanding of, for example, human psychology, and you're now in a human-centered interaction program, you will be able to really uplift your skills in a 3 or 4 year PhD program, for example.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did you decide to go with University of Manchester? I remember you were applying to a couple of other universities as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was all based on funding, of course. That was my main thing, because I didn't want to pay for my own PhD and I couldn't pay for my own PhD. So I applied to a couple of places in the UK. And of course, now I think because maybe I didn't have enough a strong research background, I applied to Warwick and a few others, and in some I didn't hear back. In some I got to like the last stage. So I got admission in all of them, but funding was a problem. So in some I didn't get funding, in some I got to the last stage where they interview you, and then I didn't. In one, I think at Warwick I was placed on the wait list. And in Manchester, I got a full funding with a stipend and everything. So all the places I applied to were, according to me, good, and they had good supervisors I wanted to work with. And all of them, I'd reached out to supervisors and spoken to them. So I didn't have a problem where I ended up as long as I had funding. And that's basically why I chose Manchester.
Yeah,
So
funding is a huge constraint. I
yeah.
feel like a global candidate, there might be one or two fully funded position available, but this scholarship, it is advertised openly on the program, or it is like available only to those who get the admission and then they disperse the funding. How does it work with Manchester?
Yeah, so most of the scholarships in the UK that are university based work like you have to apply for the university and get accepted. And once you get accepted, some of them, like for instance, Manchester didn't have its own separate scholarship application. They just put you in the pool automatically. But Warwick, you had to get accepted, and then they had separate applications. Edinburgh had separate applications, but you have to get accepted into the university before you can be considered for. So you really have to put in your applications early. Like you have to have your acceptance by December, because the scholarships applications, most of them closed by like mid-Jan, if I remember correctly. So you had to get in your scholarship application before mid-Jan, which means you had to have your acceptance, university program acceptance before then. So yeah.
Uh, did you discover anything new about yourself while you were applying for the scholarship program? Because getting an admission is one thing, it's a huge achievement, but when it comes down to why I deserve the scholarship or why I should be given this, sometimes you uncover so many new dimensions to your personality or ability to do the scholarship-based program. Did you uncover anything new there?
No, I think interesting enough, the scholarship process is not as hard as the actual applications, because, like I said, a lot of the universities didn't even have a separate scholarship application. So for Manchester, the main struggle was just to get accepted, and then it was just based on my application and my relationship with the supervisors I'd made and what happens with the funding. The main thing is reach out to supervisors first, and express your interest. They get back, because you really have to, for the UK at least. I don't know how it works in the US, because I never applied to the US, but in the UK, at least, you have to have supervisors on board before you even apply. Otherwise, no one will really look at your application. No one will know who you are. But if you've already spoken to supervisors when your application goes through, because everything happened through them, they're the ones who interviewed me, and then I got my acceptance. So I think that is the biggest struggle. Afterwards, of course, scholarships are hard, but there was only one simple application, right? Which had a few essays, few small questions, and things like that. So that wasn't that hard. I mean, I only got one scholarship, but the process itself wasn't that hard as it was to actually apply for the main PhD, I think.
Okay. How was
Yeah,
your
and of course, I didn't apply to like the Oxford scholar, like I didn't apply to Oxford, Cambridge, because I couldn't find programs. I couldn't reach out to supervisors. It didn't work out. So I don't know how their scholarships work. I'm sure they'd be a lot more competitive, but I can't speak about those universities.
a very interesting point. I'm a big proponent of that you need to be able to find supervisors whose research align with yours or where you can add value
Yeah.
there. How long did you
Yeah.
network with the professor? Because I have a timeline in mind. Like I told you, I'm interested in a PhD for myself, but what is really stopping me is I feel like I'm not good enough. Like I know what work I'm doing, but where do I start with finding exactly those professors, for example, who are focusing on social justice and inclusion of special needs students in their classroom, because that is a term for UK, they call it special needs. I have read a lot of research papers. I mean, I love reading, you do as well, and research is something
Yeah.
that does come naturally to me. But one thing that really puts me off is the number of people out there. How do I convince them that I need to be working with you?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to convince one or two people, right? Really. So, I mean, the what happened, I started by reading research papers on the topic I was interested in. So I would put in keywords in Google, and I knew which theorist I'm interested in. So I would read papers, and I would figure, and then, when you see who's written the paper in the UK, I would start making a list on Excel. Okay, these are the professors who seem interesting. And then again, and so that was one way of finding professors who may sound interesting to me. Then the other way was to literally pull out the Russell Group list, because I knew that I wanted to attend at least a good, solid university, not like a random one. And so I pulled out the Russell Group of universities list, and I looked at a couple of universities on there, several of them, and I literally would go on their School of Education website, go through each and every single professor to look at their bios and to read. And then the thing is, then I made a list on Excel of all the professors who seemed interesting, but then you can't just email them randomly with your CV. You have to read some of their research papers, make a connection between, I read this paper of yours, I read a few papers and I saw that you're interested in this and this is what I'm interested in. And you would send them, because of course, so this is around September. So of course, around September, I hadn't had like a full proposal, but I had a idea of what I want to my research on. So I would send them that short blurb, I'd send them my CV. I'd first make that connection between, this is, I read your research paper and I know you're interested in this and this is how we'd be a good fit. So I did that first, and I think I got replies from almost everyone, like literally. And I think there were some people who said, "Oh, we're going on sabbatical leave, or we don't have space for new PhD students next year." But then they almost always referred me to someone else in the department that, "Oh, I think this person would be good for you." So I don't think I found anyone who didn't reply. Professors are usually very, if you do the effort, like you know how you keep saying on your Instagram to send you proper emails with like all the information. If you do the effort to write a good email, there's no way people are not going to say no to you. So that was the first step. And in fact, the professor from Leeds was so nice that he really liked my proposal. So my like blurb of my proposal, that he actively helped me work on it. He didn't have to, right? He didn't no idea who I am, but he actually spent time revising my proposal with me. So then I spent all of September, October, November writing it. And I was working 6 days a week. At that time, I changed my job. So I think I wasn't working on Saturdays anymore.
Well, I'm just
And so I would
that
spend,
we are having an earthquake right now, but
what
it's
happened?
okay. Yeah, we just had a very bad earthquake right
Really?
now, but it should be okay.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh
My
God,
whole
do you
desk
want to
was
take a break?
shaking. No, it's
I
okay.
couldn't
I'm just
tell
going
because
to like,
your background is
is
zoomed,
it?
blurry, so I couldn't tell
Well,
from the back.
because here and there. Oh God.
Oh my God. Are you
Yeah,
okay? We can take a break
it's
and
okay.
continue
We
later if you
continue,
need.
but I really love this thing about professors who are willing to help you revise and improve your proposal.
Yeah.
Why do you think they do
Yeah.
that? I mean, what is
I
their
think they were just
motivation?
I think the motivation was that he was really hoping that I would get it. So he was a professor from Leeds and he was hoping I'd get into Leeds and he really wanted to supervise me. I think he really liked my topic. It just was unfortunate that by the time I was ready to apply, he was moving to Hong Kong. But I'm still in touch with him. I email him regularly with updates on my PhD because we really connected. He really liked my research topic. So I think it's just about making those connections. And then, so I think September, October, November was spent on literally just writing my proposal and improving it. And then once my proposal, and all the professors who had emailed said, okay, when you finish your proposal, send it to us. So I sent my proposal to everyone
Oh,
who had emailed me, and of course all of them had comments and thoughts, so they all came back with comments. And I was a bit annoyed because the professor from Edinburgh had a lot of comments, and in the end she ghosted me, but I still appreciated the time that she took to give me the comments, and of course that improved my proposal even more. Maybe her comments helped me get the scholarship. You never know, right? Like in the end she maybe got busy, or maybe she found another student who was she preferred to supervise, but she still took out the time, because I know how busy these supervisors are, especially now they have to deal with them. So the fact that she took out time to read my proposal, send me comments, that only improved my proposal more. So everyone was very supportive, very helpful. And then I applied in November, I think, because I wanted to apply to have enough time that I get the decision before Christmas break. And I think by like December, early Jan, I had started getting acceptances, and then I worked on the scholarships.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that means anyone who is considering a PhD, by the way, the US process is almost similar to UK. You make connections at least 4 to 5 months, you build rapport, it takes
Yeah.
time, it's almost similar. But the difference would be some of the positions, if they are PhD, they will be advertised as fully funded because it's an employment base like in the UK.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so I think anyone who is now looking for admission in September, they should begin the process already. Will that be the best timeline?
If they want to start in September,
this year?
if they want to start in September this year, they're already too late, aren't they? Because the scholarship applications
Yeah,
close in mid-Jan. So you really have to. So
they want you
a
mind.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, a problem is that in the UK, I know they say that admissions are rolling basis, so they don't have a deadline for most of the admissions, but that doesn't mean that you can apply whenever, especially if you want a scholarship, and especially if you want the supervisors you want, because supervisors start getting booked up really fast. Like if they give me an acceptance in December, there are only so many students a supervisor can take on, right? So I started in September a year before I joined. So it takes really a whole year because you reach out to professors, you write your proposal, you send it, December you get in, Jan you apply for the scholarships, and then by I think you apply for the scholarship in Jan, and I found out around March that I got the scholarship, and I went the following September.
Okay, that's a good
Yeah,
timeline. Yeah. We do have a lot
yeah.
of people applying for UK and they're very interested in education. That reminds me, I forgot to ask, what is your focus for your PhD? What are you writing about or researching about?
My focus is on language in Pakistan, higher education, and looking at social mobility. So I'm looking at students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who come from public school systems, went to government schools or went to NGO schools in Pakistan, and who studied in an Urdu medium system, so they weren't very fluent or very comfortable in English, and then they want to go to higher education, and that's where they have a struggle because a lot of universities, as you know, especially the good ones in Pakistan, require admission test, which always has an English component. But it's not just English, it's also other things, right? Like culturally, the environment is so different, and like all these small differences which people don't realize. So I'm kind of looking at how I think in Pakistan, the idea is if you teach English to students, they'll be fine. But there are these other minor problems as well, which actually hinder students into feeling comfortable on university campuses or in succeeding. So I'm looking at like social mobility, and like for students from lower social backgrounds, we're also looking at language. So it's kind of a combination of all of that.
Very interesting, very interesting. I think
Yeah.
it's high time, like, even like policymakers, but curriculum developers and specialists, they all need to be mindful about social mobility and that inequality, the disparity is huge coming from
Yeah.
underprivileged background, especially like TCF. There's now a huge research focus on graduates of the Citizen Foundation who are now looking for higher education, but there's not enough research on their mobility and how they are getting their
Yeah.
educational opportunity. So do
Yeah,
you
I mean, my research participants are actually TCF students because TCF is where I was working at before I started my PhD. So
oh,
I reached out to the organization. Like, so before I left TCF, I told them that, I'm applying for a PhD and I want to interview your students and will there be any problems? So I got like a letter from them saying that's fine because I want to make sure all my, areas are covered so they don't say that, oh, you didn't tell us you were researching this or whatever.
right.
Um,
Are you able to do
so
it from UK or then you have to come to Pakistan for that?
No, I came to Pakistan. I came for like 4 months last year to do field work, and that's when I interviewed about like 15 to 18 students.
Okay, interesting. All the best,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you will nail
Thank,
it. Yeah. We will be the
thank
first
you. Yeah.
people to read your PhD work.
Well, my supervisors.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We will
Yeah.
be dependent this year, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Right. All the best, Amal. We wish you best of
Thank
luck.
you.
Somehow it's all connecting for you. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. So before we wrap up, any final message for anyone in the group, be scholar or anything you would like to recommend or encourage them for?
No, I think just to be proactive and email people, and if you never know if you'll get into a program or not, if you'll get funding or not, if you don't try for it. And there's no harm in emailing people to ask for help or to make connections because those are what matters. And the worst case is they won't reply to you, but the best case scenario would be that they will reply and they'll be very helpful. And that's the experience I've had. So I think just to be proactive and email people and just be really determined if you want to do a PhD.
Right. Well, thank you. And yes,
Yeah.
I like being proactive and like not expecting perfectionism in your document, especially the proposal. It will evolve. It
Yeah.
has to evolve. But
Yeah. Oh, my proposal has evolved. Like what I wrote in my proposal and my methodology now is completely different, but the idea is the same. The core of the research remains the same. But of course, you also learn and you grow and your supervisors guide you. So yeah, of course that. But you start off with something. You have to start off with something, right? So
right. That's
yeah.
good. Thank you. And thank you, Amal, for
Yeah.
having, it's been great having you here. Mutual interest is there, but education is a really hot topic for many English language teachers. They want to go for PhD, but I think your insight will definitely motivate them to at least try their start with the application. The classroom is
Yeah.
a whole research center. There's so many issues they can tap into
Yeah.
that. Or like
Yeah,
if they're
definitely.
running non-profit management, there's another dimension to the action research. You can tap into that. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Amal. We will be in touch. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. I will just stop this recording, but